and that their value is going to go up over time. If I buy a share of reputation, I believe that you're a good person, and that other people will come to believe in you too. And I can do that in a context-free way. It doesn't mean that I think you're a good student or that you're a good person necessarily. It means that I think you're good in whatever metric I choose. So I created this entire stock market, and within 30 days I actually had a pretty wonderful result, which was that I had a list of all the most important people on the internet ranked by the relative importance. And without using any kind of crazed computer algorithms, I just let people buy and sell things and have a stock portfolio of people. The other thing that was fun is that I also had dividends. Like many stocks can pay dividends, you get a percentage of money from owning the stock, and some a small fraction, like 0.5% of the value of your stock. So every 24 hours, you would actually get money based on who your highest valued people were. And this would allow you, since you'd obviously picked good people before, to invest in new people, people that you hadn't heard of before. So since I made so much money investing in Bill Gates early, right, saying I think Bill Gates is going to become important, I could now pick you and say you guys are going to become important too, and your reputation would go up online. So the idea is that powerful people can make new powerful people, or if you're in 7th grade, hanging out with the cool kids makes you a cool kid. This happens in real life, right? This is all pretty fundamental, and actually extends horrifyingly across cultures. But it doesn't happen on the internet until this thing. And now there's a new Facebook service that I'm told has stolen this idea. But at the time, nobody had ever done this. The only people working in computer science and economics all worked on Wall Street, and we all know how that ended. So yes, like I said, Hey Econ Students is a stock market. Actually it's a virtual stock market. That is that we don't actually use real money, because my advisor told me there would be lots more paperwork if we had to use real money. Apparently Hopkins takes a dim view of stealing money from undergrads. But nonetheless, we had a virtual money, kind of like Monopoly money. But it worked in the context. And actually since then there's been interesting new work being done in this area. Mostly in the science fiction area, but I love science fiction. Actually, as I completed this, an author from Stanford, I told a few of you this last night, wrote me and said, hey, I just finished this book where instead of just having stock markets and dividends, we also have both derivative trading, so we can do things like short selling. Say, hey, I heard that so-and-so had a affair or something, and so next week her reputation is going to drop, so I will make money as she drops, which again is what killed the U.S. economy. But also that you could have boards of control. That is, in a corporation, I know this is true in the United States, and I think in most other places as well, the biggest investors form a board, and then the board can take actions to protect their investment. So they can say, yes, Microsoft, you should try and buy Yahoo or something, as they did a few months ago. And people could say, well, I don't think that's going to protect my investment, and they could vote, and the board thus controls the actions. So if we have investments in a person, this author postulated that we should then have boards for a person, and I should be able to, the four of us, say, should be able to take actions and say, I don't think Hannah should go dancing on tables tonight at a strip club, because that will lose my investment in her. Yes, sorry, Hannah, I'm going to pick on you because you're lit up by your screen, so I can see you immediately. That's the thing. And so the question is then, could a board control someone's actions? Could they say, I don't think you should come out in favor of this political action. I don't think you should endorse this candidate. I don't think you should go to that party. And what kind of the consequences would be. I thought it was a fascinating book, and it was fun that I had random cool authors writing to me. This is what happens if you go to college and you do research. People read stuff on the internet. I've never figured out why, because it's random stuff there, but they read my stuff. So the results is, those of you who are computer nerds will eventually hear about the ACM. I got published. I got to go to Chicago for free. My company paid for it. I got to meet all sorts of cool Uber nerds like Whitfield Diffie, who invented cryptography, and without this you wouldn't be able to give your credit card to a Nigerian scammer over the internet without his inventions. And lots of cool things happened, and if you want, I'll even give you a copy. For the rest of us, it's really boring, so I promise we'll move on now. So, social networks, or how geeks help you hook up. So most of you, see, when I graduated, Facebook had just launched. It wasn't a big deal yet. It was becoming mandatory for college kids, but you certainly couldn't sign up as a high school, let alone as any kind of random person who now can sign up for Facebook. So things have really changed in the last 5 years. So you all have a better understanding than I did when I left of what social networks are, but we'll go through kind of briefly. We have things like MySpace and Facebook, and there are social networks for dogs, like Dogster, which has made millions of dollars. Then we have social networks like this ad down here is for Ashley Madison, which is a social network for people looking to have affairs. They're specifically for married people who are going online to look for other married people to have sex out of wedlock with. which is either okay in your moral belief or not, but they're making a lot of money on it. And understand, this too, surprising, they advertise on late night TV. Actually, if you watch Comedy Central late at night, you'll see these ads. Their motto is, life is short, have an affair. And understand, this too, shocking, horrific, etc., though it is a type of social network. Dating networks all are. This is just a particularly awesome example. It's hilarious, personally, I think. So these are all different types of social networks. They're networks, and there are social networks for geeks like me, where we can share code. So you can actually go and upload code, and that's just as cool as posting a new picture on your Facebook wall. There are social networks for anything under the sun: dogs, cats, small children. There are social networks for people who are still not yet born. There's actually a device electrical engineer made. I don't remember where, somewhere on the East Coast, I think, that actually, how many of you know what Twitter is? You can, yeah, so you post little, it's like, just like wall updates, except it predates Facebook's wall having just arbitrary status updates by about a year and a half. And so he actually allowed his unborn son to tweet from the womb, because he had essentially a belt with electrical pressure sensors that he wrapped around his wife's belly, and every time the child kicked, it would go to the internet and say, "I just kicked mommy," over and over and over. Millions of people subscribed to the "I just kicked mommy" feed. It was kind of hilarious. So this expands continuously. There will always be more social networks. This is what we call in the internet business the long tail. So yes, there's a huge bell curve, and then at the end of the bell curve, there's this long tail of people who like people who are wearing fur, or people who only like thinking about Star Wars all the time, or people who like thinking about Star Trek, which is infinitely better, or any of these things, right? So there's social networks for everything, and they're all kind of important as we move on to this next step. So then you can take all these social networks, and you can do this. This is from my actual website. You can see I have Twitter feeds, which is a T. I have YouTube, which I know you guys have never heard of, but it's this cool thing. It's going to be really important. And then the two dots are Flickr. And I actually have about, well, last time I counted, it was more than 20 different social networks to which I subscribe. And I have on my website basically a list of everything I do on every social network continuously. So this is like Facebook wall if Facebook didn't have huge walls around it. That is, if you could import and export data from Facebook, your wall would look more like this. You'd have many more things from many more services, not just "I got bit by a zombie" showing up on your wall. This to me is one facet of privacy. That is, that I'm putting everything I do on every website on the internet available for the whole world to see. It's the first thing that shows up if you search for my name. It's the first website, rather, that I own that's about me, as opposed to a cybersecurity researcher from Stanford or this random sociologist guy. And so this is my public face, and people, often ask, well, what about all of your privacy? And aren't you worried that people won't hire you based on this? So, first of all, what about your privacy? As I was saying before, I think this is really useful because it shows people how much data they're leaking. All of this data, every time you tweet something, every time you put a picture on Flickr or Picasa, and actually every time you put anything on Facebook, though Facebook tries to pretend this isn't true, is all immediately public. The whole world can see it, whether they're supposed to be able to or not. And so it's important to be able to see, this is what people find if they look for you on the internet. If you type in your name to Google, which is one of the more narcissistic actions you can take, but it's also kind of important, you can find what the web knows about you. And it's kind of interesting to see what exactly the web knows about you. So if you type in just my first and last name, just Brendan O'Connor, you find that I was killed in Iraq. Which sucks. And then also that I might be either a lawyer in Chicago or I might be an Australian member of Parliament. But if you type in either my full name or you type in my usual name on the internet, which is USS Join, you find hundreds of pages of things about me. Things I did in 2000 when I was a high school debater before I came here, posting on forums about nuclear weapons and things. You can find all of those things. And this just only continues. Again, not kind of meant to scare you, but if you got on the internet at 13 and did something illegal and it's a record of it somewhere, this will still be on the internet when you're 25 and unemployed and looking for a job. So it's important to be able to control this. It's important at least to understand it. The first step to be able to control these things, and really, you can't get rid of things on the internet, but you can make them not show up as prevalently in Google or other search engines, is to understand what all this data is going to. So now we're going to move on to location, the actual focus, the thing I'm actually theoretically doing now when I'm working. And so we're going to talk first about location in things that aren't location social networks. So one of the things I think is interesting is Flickr. How many of you guys have used Flickr? Okay, how many of you know what Flickr is? Oh, thing. Okay, so those of you who don't know, Flickr is a social network owned by Yahoo now for just photos. You can upload your photos. People can say, "Oh, that's a wonderful photo," or in my case, "Oh, that's a terrible photo. Why did you take that?" And it's great, and lots of things are cool. Something a lot of people don't know is this thing called EXIF data, EXIF.